This is Janice.
And I'm Sarah N.
And we're your hosts for Explore This, a podcast for the modern day working professional.
Each week, we explore actionable insights on how you can thrive personally and professionally.
On today's episode, we're going to be speaking about something quite close to our hearts. We'll be speaking about navigating a different era, specifically our 30s era. And we'll be talking about our careers, family dynamics, friendships, and even relationships to just uncover how our priorities and how our perspectives have shifted since our 20s. So let's dive in. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So to start off, let's have a chat about how we felt turning 30. Was it something that you felt maybe anxious or nervous about, or did it just feel like just another regular turn of a year?
So as Janice and I were preparing for our conversation, which we haven't had in a very long while actually, having had many guest episodes, this is one that brought about a very reflective phase as I think about the 2 years ago when I turned 30. And also for some of you who don't already know, we did an episode with Ashley on the topic of 20s going on 30s, writing your own narrative. So it brought me back to that day where we recorded that episode. And back then, I wasn't 30 yet. Now, fast forward 2 years later, we are here at 32 for myself. No shame about that, embracing it wholeheartedly. I remember turning 30 thinking to myself, I think I try not to make a big deal out of it and treat it as a regular turn of the year. But I will say that there were a lot of things I had to think about in terms of whether I was hitting certain milestones in life. I think I definitely had certain dreams and aspirations when it came to, especially from the personal front, from family, getting married, kids and all of that. But all in all, it's just to say, I think I tried my best to treat 30 like a regular turn of the year. What about you, Jen?
I think for me, when I was in my 20s, I will admit that I thought turning 30 would be
It.
It would be the moment where all my milestones would be checked. I would get the corner office, make partner at a law firm. So we were both young lawyers. We had a career in law, started as young legal associates. And I thought that by 30, that would be when I would eventually make partner. I would be married by then and somehow also have kids along the way. But that wasn't the case, right? So I turned 31 this year. And for me, turning 30 last year felt oddly, very mundane, or rather very usual. So, when I turned 30 last year, it was also a time when a personal family crisis hit. Someone very, very dear to me actually passed on. So I distinctly remember when I turned 30, I actually had a whole host of feelings, but most of all, I just felt very grateful to have the opportunity to turn another decade. So it felt like more of a gratitude of turning older, getting to live another year, embrace another decade, rather than to feel like, oh my gosh, regretful, why didn't all these milestones happen to me? Obviously the 30s era didn't play out like how I imagined it to be. I ended up pivoting out of law, similar to Sarah, moved to another country in between, in the midst of the pandemic. Yeah, and had a lot of firsts, did a lot of crazy things in between as well. But I will say that turning 30, it was very different than what I imagined it to be. The only thing that I checked off the list was that I got married. Other than that, I don't regret a thing. And I'm very glad as to how my 30s, or starting the eras of my 30s, how everything sort of played out. So no regrets over there.
Oh yeah, so we're diving into a few other pillars. The next one we're going to be speaking about is more from the career front. So Janice, why don't you share with us a little bit more in terms of how your career goals as well as aspirations have changed since you moved into your 30s? And were there any key lessons that you took away from that?
Yeah, I would say me now, 31, versus me at 21, 10 years ago. It's like two different humans, if I could even say it that way, right? How I process life, how I even define career success. So I would say in my early 20s, I had a very fixed mindset of what success would look like. I was, hand on heart, very honestly speaking, driven by prestige, by title, recognition. I was like, okay, by this age, I would have achieved X, Y, Z. But I think the turning point really came with doing the MBA and having that moment of reckoning that I do want to pivot out of law because it's not something I saw myself doing in the long run. So made it a very difficult decision to leave law and then eventually pivoted into HR, consulting, and then now in career services. And I will say, with each shift, I'm slowly discovering what my sweet spot is, which kind of in a very tangible way is where my area of interest aligns with the areas of strength. And I will say the key lesson learned, right? There's so many lessons, to be honest, in our 20s, and we've spoken at length about it on our podcast as well. But for me, one of the biggest lessons I learned is to not tie my identity and self-worth to my job or to my job title, but really to invest in, personal growth, invest in skill sets that I can leverage for my other career moves and different things I want to pursue. So really to show that, success is not defined by just having that linear career trajectory, but rather it can look really squiggly, it can look diverse as well. What about you? What about your sort of career realizations of 30s versus your 20s?
Firstly, to start off with, Janice and I had very different legal experience. We both did our pupillage in Malaysia and then continued on to practice for a short while, but we had very vast and very diverse experience, right? So for myself, I was in two rather small boutique law firms. Janice was in a larger firm doing corporate tax. For myself, I was doing a mixture of general civil litigation, but my bosses were also hugely involved in human rights as well as strategic litigation cases, right? So sometimes I'll be telling stories with Janice about how we would be accompanying some of our clients to the police station, or we'll be doing some human rights protest. Or
a lot exciting than that, I will say.
I remember being involved in several vigils as well. It was a very, very colorful pupillage experience because of the kind of work that my bosses did. But have I ever thought and considered and aspired to be a law firm partner? To be completely honest, I think the answer was no. I've never actually, and maybe it's because I started out in such a small firm and there was no clear trajectory or track of this is the way you make partner and this is what everyone aspired to be. I really don't think we had such conversations. But to be fair, it's also because my bosses came out of big firms and then they started off their own smaller firms wanting to do something that's different, right? So I don't think I had those kind of ideas in mind. But all of this is to say that the differences that came on a little bit later into my 20s really started through the career pivot for the MBA. And we've spoken at great length about how transformational the MBA program has been. But more importantly, after that, being able to do that very significant career pivot for myself into tech. And little did I know, it's now been 4.5 years in the tech industry, which, thinking about it, it's more than the time that I've been in practice and been in a legal sphere, right? So, wow, I stuck around longer than I expected and still happy to be in this industry. And for me, I would say that, having built the foundations in the tech industry now for the past 4.5 years, I think of my career moving forward in terms of all right, there are certain skills that I've honed in already. How can I double click on that, yet still stretching additional muscles and build certain skills that I feel I've not built? And all of this, it reminds me of Kian Ming's quote where he says, think of your career in a way of building several different skill sets along the way, and your career can also form different chapters. I think for me, my learning is really about recognizing what are the key strengths that you bring to a table, but also identifying what your foundational values are and how these two can work hand in hand for you to find whatever that next role or that next stage of your career might be. But most importantly, it's to know what you bring to the table and what are the things you stand for, because I think those are things that will set you up for success, especially when you know it from a personal front. I think it spills over into your professional life, right? So I love how Janice and I are always very aligned whenever we advocate and share with young professionals about how we shouldn't tie our self-worth to our job titles, to the companies that we work for, etc., etc.
It's so evident in the news that we see, there are layoffs happening, companies just winding up out of nowhere. And I think what has happened over the past years with the tech layoffs and, different collapses of banks and whatnot, it's just reminded me that we can't just rely on one company or tie our whole worth to this job title that we have, because once that's gone, then who are we, right? Sounds really existential, but really it's just reminding yourself that you are more than just the current position and the title that you hold. And to be honest, these were things that we had to also learn the hard way and figure it out along the way, and we don't have it all figured out yet. But I would say in the few, 1 decade so far that has passed, we've gone through certain events and certain things to really, at least on my end, make me realize that it's a never-ending journey of self-discovery. And you are more than your job, your company, your title. Yeah. Don't come after me, companies. So I think so much learnings to be shared when it comes to career. But, we're going to switch gears and speak a little bit about something that mean a lot to both of us, which is family. And I think when we look at our 20s era and our 30s era, I can say for myself, like how I've interacted with my family and the dynamics has shifted. But I'd love to hear from you. How has these dynamics shifted, if it has? And are there any new family responsibilities or new roles that you've taken up since you've, entered this 30 era?
Yeah, so for context, some of you who might not know, I am the only daughter in my family out of 4 siblings. There is myself, my elder brother, and 2 more younger brothers. Our age gap between myself and my younger brothers are pretty huge. So with that, I think from a very young age, I did take on, the big sister role. And I think the past 2 years, I've definitely had to step up even more because my elder brother got married and moved out with my sister-in-law. But for me, while I still live with my family, and it's something that I'm very grateful to be able to do that, right? Our parents are not getting any younger. But one of the things that I've learned, and this is quite recent as well, I would say, is how I need to be very intentional with building my family relationships. And I guess why I say that is because I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like with friends, it's so much easier to build the friendship compared to family. And why I say that is because families, like it or not, sometimes we take them for granted, right?
Like they're always there.
They're always there, like it or not.
Well.
You live under the same roof. Yeah. But the reality is sometimes we can treat our family members like just housemates. You just walk in and out of the house. Everyone's busy doing their own thing. Everyone's got their own lives happening. And unless you actually sit down and be intentional about creating conversations, I feel that sometimes we do take it for granted, myself guilty as well. And in addition to all of that, I am the only girl, and my brothers are not particularly talkative, or, they'll be like, Cheche will tell the
Unlike
story.
Sarah and not
Sarah, yeah, it's like I would always have some other stories to share to keep my family and my parents amused, etc. My brothers would just have a very deadpan face of like, next. I think something that I've been pretty intentional and doing my best, especially in coming into the 30s, is really around playing an active role to organize family activities. And I've asked this question, right, to some of my closest friends, and I say, what do your family do outside of eating? Because no guesses there.
We love our food.
We love our food, and that's an easy way that we get together and we bond, right? But beyond food, like how exactly do your family spend time together? And for myself, when I realized that, I don't actually think there are that many activities that my family do besides eating. That's when, I started being a little bit more intentional about it. So for example, for my 30th birthday, I organized a day trip to the Sticks for a 1-day family trip just to be outdoors. We were by a river. It was all really nice. And then last year in 2023, for my mom's belated 60th birthday, I decided to level it up a little and do 2 days, 1 night just to see how the family would do. And it was really nice. We went to Tatham Hill. We played like giant Jenga, watched my dad play beach volleyball with my siblings, doing rafting with my sister-in-law, my brothers and stuff like that. So I think it's about like infusing certain activities in there so that it goes beyond food. And like it or not, bringing my parents into the picture when it comes to, example, playing board games, right? It's not just like, oh, it's a children thing, or like, oh, you siblings go and play, but like, trying to be patient to teach my parents how to play a new board game and making sure they can learn along the way. And it's okay to not know, it's okay to make mistakes, but it's about doing a family activity together. With my sister-in-law being pregnant, and I think by the time this episode is released, my little nephew would have been born. And for me, it's just recognizing that there is a new birth in the family now, and how can I play an active role as a first-time aunt. So yeah, these are the few new updates from a family front, and I can definitely see the shifts happening from 20s to 30s. And what about you, Jen?
So for me, some context I will provide is that I stayed with my family, right? I mean, this, up till my early 20s. And then in my mid-20s, I moved out, and that was when I, moved abroad for work in Hong Kong. So it's been a while since I actually lived under my parents' roof. So in that sense, I feel like the 20s and the 30s, I feel like I've been away from home for a bit. But the thing about my family that I really love is that we are super intentional with keeping close. Because my sister's abroad, and I haven't been living at home for a while, we always have this cute little thing where we have like a Sunday chat. So it's designated, and like my friends know this, right? Whenever I'm out with them, I'm like, okay, it's Sunday,
Gotta go
6
back.
p.m. Like, bye, I gotta go. Like, so it's the family Zoom time. We always make sure wherever we are in the world that we have that designated time to just bond, right, and to keep close. But I think one big difference I would say between the eras, not so much because of age, but more because of, I think, getting married, right? So that itself has created a whole new shift because it's not just my parents that I am kind of looking after, but it's also my in-laws who are, really, really amazing in-laws. Love them. And it's taking a lot of being intentional to spend time with them, to make sure that, myself and my husband, that we are caring for them and giving that, thinking about what we can do together as a family as well, like you mentioned, beyond food. Some things that we can do to bring the family all together. Those are some things that I am now thinking about quite proactively and actively compared to in my 20s when I was still, dating, but I wasn't married yet. So it was very much like when it comes to family, it's always like me and my sister and my family, like,
Just
that
that
sort of
immediate
dynamic.
nuclear family, but now it's like definitely expanded.
It's expanded, for good. Another thing that I was actually thinking about when we discussed these prompts is that I think reverse parenting is something that I'm experiencing. Not sure
how's
about
that
you.
like?
Yeah, that's been really interesting. So what I mean by reverse parenting, it's kind of like, when you get to a certain age and your parents are getting older, I find myself parenting them, not in a bad way, but in a way where like, they are getting older. So, different illnesses come about. So as children, we are having to check on them, making sure they're okay. And I find my parents also coming to me for life advice sometimes, which I'm honored and privileged to help solve. But yeah, that's happening more and more often where I'm realizing like, hey, okay, this is the time where the switches are flipped a little bit. And I'm now, advising my parents on things, having to be like the parent or like the coach in a way, kind of paying it forward, which is a position that is both privileged and also something that's a bit bittersweet for me, because it's a stark reminder of aging and how our parents are kind of eventually moving towards the sunset years. So something interesting that I've come to realize in terms of family dynamics and how the tables have turned.
And sometimes I wonder, right, do our parents realize that there is this reverse parenting? Like, I don't know if they're conscious about it, right? Like you say, it's a really stark reminder because for us, we are in a generation with so much more knowledge, and for them, they did the best with what they could with what they had, right? But for us, we have so much more access, etc., to knowledge and information in our fingertips and resources as well. So they're always coming out to us asking for like, how do you do this? How do you do that?
How do you upload reels? How do I add music to my reels? Like legit, sorry mom, calling you out. How do I edit my Me Too Siu Siu?
I mean, like these are just like the fun social stuff, but obviously there are deeper conversations that we're beginning to have with our parents. Like for me, very honestly as well, been having some conversations with my folks about health, and me being the one to have to nudge them a little to say, I think you need to be a little bit more conscious about what you eat and about what you just overall consume.
Flossing
right?
as well, I'm sure. She's been reminding friends and family about flossing your teeth.
Yes, not sponsored, open to it, however.
Open to it, orally.
But yeah, I like how you put it. Tables have turned. So I don't think our parents are aware of that though. What do you think? To them, maybe
Probably
they think it's just
not.
a conversation.
Yeah, they probably see us as still their children because, like, hand on heart and confession, I still love it when parents cut fruits for me.
Asian parents love.
When they
love you, mom.
Love you, mom. Every time I come over, there's like a full spread on the table.
Yeah.
They still see us as kind of kids
forever
to be taken
in their
care
hearts.
of.
Yeah.
But I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
Keep it coming, mom.
Yeah, and all the boiled long soy. Bless.
Love it.
So, on the note of 20s moving into our 30s and some other shifts, I think a topic that we cannot escape from is on the topic of friendships as well. So this is always a fun one. For yourself, Jan, how has your view on friendships changed since your 20s? Have you found it harder or easier to make new friends in your 30s? And if there are certain shifts that you've seen in your own circle of friendships, what are they?
I think the immediate one is that everyone's either married, engaged, popping babies, or doing a marathon. That's the meme, but so true, right? And for me, one immediate observation that I had reflecting on this is that my circle has certainly shrunk over the years. I think in my 20s, I was very much like let's hang out in like a big gang, let's go out in like a big group of 10, and then, it's always very large social circles kind of thing. But over the years, I've definitely been hanging out with smaller groups, keeping in touch with people very intentionally as well. And another thing I noticed is that maintaining friendships is another thing, right? Making friends is one thing, which is harder now because, you have certain interests, your life priorities are different, people are different stages of life. But I think maintaining friendships, even with your chosen, circle of friends, that is really difficult as well. I mean, hey, we are scheduling Google Calendar meets 1 month in advance. I'm like, how do we find a slot for brunch? That itself is, a very impossible feat. But yeah, it takes so much intentionality, and I'm realizing that what makes it even harder are even friendships that are long distance, right? Scheduling those Zoom calls, making sure we have like a monthly cadence, so to speak. That's all very, very difficult. But at the same time, it's not a bad thing for me. I will say, like, even though the circles have shrunk, I feel like I am now kind of prioritizing quality over quantity, right? Keeping in touch very intentionally with the people who I feel that, I get along well with, that I have aligned values on, and that we can grow together with in the different years of our life. But yeah, I would say friendship is one thing for me that has changed quite significantly from like 20s to 30s. But interestingly, this has been solid all the way through the eras and many more eras to come. But yeah, what about you? How's the friendship side of things been like?
I've always been someone who is quality over quantity. To be completely honest and fair, I don't think I ever have like, big circles of friends. And it's more of like smaller groups of 3 or 4 people across the different eras from high school, college, etc. But I think for myself, I've personally experienced some friendship breakups along the way. And this is also something we've spoken about before in a separate episode. And those are very real instances of where you have to be quite confronting about the kind of friendships that you want to make, but also the kind of friendships that you want to maintain. And I think for me, some of the learnings that I've had across this is, and I think I still stand by it, however harsh it might be, because I do think it's true, at least for me, which is that some friendships are for a season, and that's actually okay. I don't think that, we should try to hold on to things that will not serve us. If it's something that, depletes our energy, if we find that our values are not aligned, I think that it's okay to part ways and potentially find your way through other friendships, right? Invest yourself somewhere else. But all of that being said, I've also had the privilege of being able to repair some friendships and, have those friendships been on the mend. And that has also brought a great amount of joy, right? I can speak of some friendships that we've fallen apart or just grown apart. But eventually, when it came time for us to, be able to have certain conversations and moving forward, wanting to be intentional to build on from those foundations from our early years, I was really open to that, and so was that particular friend. And in fact, now we're closer than we ever have been. So all of this is to say friendships are and could be seasonal, but for some that you decide and you want to be intentional about building them, I'm absolutely all for investing into it. If the calendar invites have got to go in a month in advance or even 6 months in advance, so be it. Of course, always make time for spontaneous meetups, but I really, really do prioritize being intentional with spending time with the people who I feel mean the most to me. I also do my best to keep a great deal of friendships that are overseas. So, scheduling the calls and being quite intentional about them. It's never easy, especially with dreaded time zones, but some of them have been very rewarding. And as they say, you are the average of the 5 people that you hang out the most with, right? I think whenever we talk about this topic, my heart is always filled with gratitude for like my tight circle of friends, Janice being one of them, and a few more others who have just played a huge role in helping me be who I am today. I call them my chosen family. And so, something that if you have them as well, this is your chance to send them some love and appreciate them.
Tag them in the comments. #fam. But no, thanks for sharing that. And it is difficult, I think, when you have that moment of realization that like, look, this friendship, good as it used to be, is no longer serving you because they might be like really toxic or they might be draining you, right? So to have the courage to even make the first move to initiate conversation, that takes so much like courage, I would say.
Never easy. I will be honest, I haven't always been the most courageous. And sometimes the other party might have to be the one that, steps it up a little. But either way, we're all adults, right? And I think we can have adult conversations, and it's for each of us to make our own version of our boundaries. Because if we don't make the boundaries, people are sure to cross them because you are not being clear about what you accept and what you don't.
Yeah, if you don't respect or even have boundaries, people wouldn't know where the line is.
Yeah.
So, well said. And, moving on next, we are going to turn up the spice level just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
We're going to talk about relationships. And, the question that I have for us to discuss is, what has it been like navigating relationships in our 30s? And I think for you, is there anything that you would look for in a partner now that might be different than what you may have valued maybe in your 20s?
I guess this episode it's quite an apt time to be able to just open up a little and share about my personal version of what I call a life quake. So, it's like an earthquake, but it happens in life. It's a life quake where I did have a separation with a long-term partner. And I've actually never spoken about this publicly, so it is pretty scary. In fact, the first time I ever spoke about it was in a very intimate meetup. Like I say intimate, right? There were 50 people, but it was a safe space, right? Nothing was recorded.
This safe space too.
Yeah,
right?
I hope, right? I mean, it's going out in the world. Don't know who's
Yes.
watching, but legit, when we were at our community meetup and I spoke about it very briefly for the very first time, that was in a confined space. I knew the 50 people, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, this is going out there. I was blown away at how different people responded when I was able to openly share about, this life quake that I went through, because I strongly believe in being open and vulnerable. And I appreciate it when someone's being vulnerable with me, but yeah, I'm not going to lie. It's hard to be the one being vulnerable, right? It's always a really difficult one, right? But anyways, I think the past, year and a bit has really grown me in many different ways through this season of grief and pain and loss, because there was somebody that was in your life that you've planned a life with, and you learn how to take a step back and reevaluate a lot of things when it comes to where you want to go in your future directions. But from the relationship front, I think something that is really important to me moving forward would be being able to find someone who's really aligned with me in terms of my values and my non-negotiables. And I know it's easier said than done because we all want that, right? But I think when it comes to having difficult conversations, have them upfront with whoever your future partner is. That's the advice that I've been given, right? Have these curly and difficult conversations up front so that it's not something that you do when you've been in the relationship for that much longer. But yeah, I think the differences between the 20s and especially the late 20s and then now into the 30s, reevaluating from the relationship piece on what is it that I'm looking for that next partner that comes along, hopefully.
Putting this out to the world.
Yeah.
May the future Mr. Right hopefully be able to, fit those ticks and checks and X's.
Oh, and also the best friend check, by the way, not going to be an easy one. But I will say, something that I really thought it was really going to be important for me to add is that in the period of, grief and loss and things like that, one thing I've really learned is to sit with my feelings and not to dismiss them. And if you know me, I'm somebody who loves to express myself, like journaling and things like that. But sometimes it's also easier to sweep things under the carpet, because why not, right? Why do you want to actually intentionally,
confront this feeling,
this. I know I'm pretty intentional as a person, but to intentionally confront these feelings, it's not easy, right? But I think I've really had to learn how to just let myself feel things and recognize that this grief process can be like one step forward and two steps back, and it's okay. And something that I learned, and I read this, someone wise on the internet said this, which is to let time take its time. So yeah, that's still, the journey that I'm on, and also recognizing that, hurting and healing can happen at the same time, and always onwards and upwards.
Beautifully said, and I am honestly super proud of you. This time last year, things were so very different. You've gone through the highs and lows, right? Like you mentioned, one step forward, two steps back, but, through the thick and thin, I think you've always reminded yourself of all of the things that could come out of it, all the learnings and all the growth that could come out of it. And no matter what, I'm just super proud of you.
Thank you. I have to say, having a really tight circle of trusted and safe space best friends has helped me so much in that healing because, yeah, my best friends are the ones that I'll be like having coffee in a public coffee shop with them and half eating and crying and sobbing into my spaghetti. So
Always be ready with a tissue packet.
yeah, keeping it real, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, those have definitely happened. So I'm so grateful for my best friends who, catch my tears and, offer me a tissue and a shoulder and everything else in between when I needed them.
Great things are to come.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah. And what about you, Jan?
Yeah, I think for me, now that I have been married for over a year, in terms of the relationship front, I think the next big question on my mind, and on somehow every auntie's mind during Chinese New Year, is on building a family. And that's also something I feel nervous about the moment I talk about it, right? Because it's something super personal. And to be honest, why this is something that I think many women in their 30s can relate to is that it also has to do with our age, right? The very real fact is that the biological clock is ticking, at whether or not we like to admit it. And yeah, those are very real constraints that I am thinking about. And just a PSA, we did do an episode on egg freezing on the Explore This podcast where we discussed with Crystal about some of the processes and reasons, right? Pros, cons, considerations when you're thinking about egg freezing. And at this point, I will say I don't feel completely ready yet. Even though so many people have come up to me telling me, I mean, yeah, with good intentions or whatnot, but like, oh, you'll never feel ready. You should just like go for it and then like figure it out. That's what everyone says. But I think for me, I would ideally like to be, I think, at a place where I do feel like, okay, if this were to happen, I would be like at peace with it. And right now, it's not the moment yet. So I'm taking my time. And also at the same time, still wrestling with this very conflicting, feeling and all the nuances in between. All to say that, yeah, I'm still figuring that out. That's something that I am wrestling with. I think some of you might relate to me. So nonetheless, I think knowledge is power. And we had a discussion about this recently, right? Another PSA that Sarah reminded me about is that it's never too late to go and check on your fertility health. You gotta check, in the fertility clinic on the state of your eggs, because I think when you have knowledge, and knowledge is power, then you'll be able to make a very informed decision on the steps to do and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's me. I think wrestling with it, grappling with it, but nonetheless, I'm okay with it.
So I'm very curious actually, Jen, when like Kepo aunties ask you what's happening next on the kids front, how have you been responding to them?
Oh, a variety of reasons. I give, from the very spiritual reason of, by God's grace, we shall see.
And God's timing.
Yeah, God's timing. Or just like death stare and walk away. Or
depending on what kind of relationship you need to maintain with that Kepo auntie.
Yeah, or just the fake laugh and
change topic.
Yeah. Pivot. Very nice dress. And it always works. It always works.
So to wrap things up, Janice, what is one advice that you would love to give to your 20s self?
Yeah, one piece of advice that I would like to say to my 21-year-old self, and this comes from the wise words of our friend Marcus. He's put it so eloquently, which is that don't let age define or constrain you. The possibilities are endless once you free your mind. And this is something that I resonate so deeply with, right? Because in my 20s, I felt like my youth was a liability rather than a privilege or an asset, right? Through the different career pivots that I've had, I had questioned myself like, oh my goodness, I'm so young, like will they take me seriously? And all the imposter syndrome thoughts that come with it. But what I had failed to realize was that, in your 20s, that is the prime time for you to question, to stumble, to learn, sometimes fall along the way, but that is the time of exploration. So for those of you in the early 20s, please don't feel like, you're too young for this or that. Your age really is just a number. Don't let that constrain you. And, I'm really so inspired by those who, even at whatever age they're at, has gone on to do incredible things. So the latest example is Michelle Yeoh. Yes, Michelle Yeoh. Go Michelle, doing us Asian women proud. But I think even closer to shores, a 60-year-old grandpa, Sarah Wakian, who actually just hiked Mount Everest.
Wow.
I mean, these people are doing amazing things. So I would say, our 30s, lots of great things we can expect, even though the backaches are so real. But hey,
And I would say even
got this.
closer to home, Janice, like my mom at 61
Your mom.
joining the gym, having a PT. Not sure if I should be telling all of these secrets, but
Yeah.
my mom has personally been an inspiration, right? Like every single morning for the past 3 months or something, I don't see her in the mornings. I'm busy
She's
walking.
off hiking.
Oh no, she's
road
in the
running.
gym.
Oh my goodness.
She's like going for her early morning walk at 6:45. She comes back from her morning walk and goes off to the gym. By the time she comes
Oh my
back, it's
gosh.
like 10:30.
I'm
So
super
that's
impressed.
Even closer to shores.
Go Auntie Min. What about you, Sarah? What's one piece of advice you'll give your 20 self?
This is a quote I heard somewhere which, really spoke to me. A comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. So to my 21-year-old self, or anyone out there listening that, feels this might resonate with you, it's fine and it's okay. And it's actually a great thing if you're able to actively seek discomfort, if you feel that those are areas of opportunities and growth for you. I think sometimes we get too caught up with just being too comfortable and wanting to seek comfort, but the discomfort is where growth actually happens. And on that note, thanks to Michelle Obama, this quote always sticks with me, which is that for me, becoming isn't about arriving somewhere or achieving a certain aim. I see it instead as a forward motion and a means of evolving. And this is how I like to think of myself, as an ever-evolving being, a constant work in progress. So yeah, to my 21-year-old self, or even to my 41-year-old self, I hope you're someone who's continuously evolving.
From a cocoon to a butterfly
Yeah.
and more. So well said, Sarah. And I think, this is where we wrap up on this conversation. So we just want to say to our audience, thank you so much for joining us as we kind of walk down memory lane and think about our life in our 20s and our 30s and share these different perspectives and the different pillars of our lives. So we hope that these different insights and very raw and real sharing resonates with you and perhaps even offer you comfort or encouragement as you might be grappling through these things.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to tag us on Explore This Podcast across all our socials. And, truly inspired by Taylor Swift in all her different eras. Remember to embrace your 20s wholeheartedly. And also, if you're in your 30s already or moving towards there, that's also something to be joyously looking forward to. So with that, we'll say goodbye for now.
If you stuck around to the end of this episode, we want to say thank you for exploring with us. And if you don't already, please follow us on Spotify, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review, and most importantly, share this episode with your friends.
We'd love to hear from you. So you can also connect with us on Instagram using the Instagram handle Explore This Podcast. ACTSPLORE This Podcast. New episodes for Explore This drops every alternate Mondays at 8 p.m. See you then!